Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black in. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Let me get right to this message. This is for the audience members of two content creators to whom I plan to listen more moving forward. Now, the two content creators are Caesar Cannon and Manosphere. Since I found out through them that a non-black man and light-skinned motivations channel was down, and I've heard more of what they've had to say, and I found them to be more balanced than Anon and LSM, and more balanced than a lot of their other commentators. But see, I'm speaking right now to the audience members of Caesar Cannon and Manosphere, because I don't hear an imbalance from them, like I heard from Anon and LSM sometimes, but like I read from them a lot, and like I read from their commentators all the time. I'll be honest, I can't get with another commentator, one of theirs, that calls black people skid marks. I don't mention her name only because we've had a civil exchange, but I still expect her to insult darker skinned people who aren't even her enemies just because they're darker skinned. I expect this to come out one day. Still, from Caesar Cannon and Manosphere, I have no rancor towards people, and I don't hear rancor from them towards people with higher melanin counts. They don't take issue with people just based on them being darker skinned. You have to come after them or go after someone else for being pale before they're going to jump on you. You have to be unfairly biased before they would react with the bias against you. And that's what I can respect about them. What I do get from them is that they have an understanding that they are desired outside of the black communities from which we genetically descend. I gather that they will tolerate no crap from anyone. They will defend themselves from enemies even within our race, and I mean the black race, and no one can blame them for this. Let me point something out, though, about the US and Canada and maybe the UK. White supremacy there has met a backlash that makes colorism a two-sided issue that it has never been in other parts of the world as far as we know. In other countries, it's pretty much one formula, and I don't know of which ones have the reverse to this, but the formula is the paler craps on the darker. And nobody would try to ever become darker intentionally. But in the three nations I mentioned, they would and they do. Now, I've laid out in the sun and gotten darker, and I must say I looked damn good with a tan, but I don't think I'm ugly without one. The point, though, is that this international white supremacy and its resultant colorism has been resisted and opposed in the US and Canada, and I'm sure the UK, from what it sounds like. So if I was in Haiti and they didn't trust me, I would not blame them. Their experiences with Haitians that resemble me might actually be all bad, or they may not. It would take Haitians to tell me. Maybe they never saw a Haitian with my phenotype that treated them well. Maybe they did. Like I said, it would take one of them to tell me. Don Calypso could tell me how I would be treated, what would be expected of me. In India, maybe a Dravidian never was befriended by someone as pale as me. If they didn't target me for mistreatment, I could accept that they may have little reason to trust me. Because, see, in these areas, it's always been one way, and that is the paler people dumping on or just keeping at a distance those with higher melanin counts. In the U.S., though, this hasn't been the case. It's been resisted. The white supremacist model of colorism has been resisted and fought back against, to the point the pendulum swings just as far the other way within our community, meaning the black community. So because of this, I won't accept that kind of backlash directed against me in the USA or Canada or even in the UK. I advise no one to accept it. Do not participate in the white supremacist model of colorism, and do not accept a retaliation for that in which you refused to participate. I've said that black folks should defend ourselves from white supremacists, and I meant it. We better do so. We'll die if we don't. Most black folks aren't about to shoot other black folks over complexion anyway, so most black folks aren't the enemy. The problem is that the few of our people that become intraracial enemies and aggressors, some of them whom themselves are not even that highly melanated, deserve retaliation. But then that leads to another thing I have to mention, another caveat. Those who single us out for mistreatment are oftentimes not adults and they're not violent. So what we go through as adults is rarely violent. It's just verbal. However, we have to admit that many of us will carry trauma. Even if you see someone else go through it and you were just an observer, you may carry some minor trauma from witnessing that. So as kids in the USA, Canada, and the UK, we probably need to specialize in self-defense at younger ages, and more seriously too. As adults, we probably need to get our kids specialized in self-defense. As adults, though, let me explain something to the ladies of all shades in the black population. Ladies, in case you don't want me to call it a community, I'll say population. We black males who are mixed or light-skinned don't face physical threats often from anyone because of our immediate phenotypes. I assume that you don't face it much as adults either. I assume you don't. I'm guessing. But I know sometimes it does happen, especially in the hood. And my life experience is not in the hood. I've been through it, I've had friends in it, but I didn't grow up in the hood, so I can't say that what I faced as an adult is a lot of physical violence and threats. If it's different in the hood, let me know, because that's where you can tell me. What I can tell you is that in black, middle class, and upper class environments, the violence is probably less than what it would be in the hood, even in childhood, but it is there. Then in adulthood, it's gone. So we don't face these oftentimes threats of violence because of our intermediate phenotypes. And I mean those of us that are adults don't have to deal with this often, if ever. But what does stay the same from childhood to adulthood is negative stereotyping. And this negative stereotyping and distancing is coming from specifically Western black women of the same three nations I just mentioned. It does not go away as we get older. Black women are free to prefer darker men, and that's normal for women who consider themselves black and even who don't. However, as paler-skinned black men, we learn early on that women of either shade from these three countries' black communities or populations want us to stand back from them, except maybe for friendship or to satisfy non-sexual needs. So for this reason, there is not only a reason for light-skinned black men to be in the Manosphere, Ms. Philosophier, and her audience members mostly. There's not only a reason for us to be in the Manosphere, but by confessions of Western black women and the observations of all black men of all shades in these countries, we have more reasons to be in the Manosphere, provided it is the black Manosphere. Because again, the white Manosphere is not it. They got their own issues. Yes, I'm probably speaking from bias, but my bias is still based on observation. Their communities deserve this stuff. That's another history lesson I don't want to go into now, but when white manosphere, when white men and women are at each other's throats, hey, don't interrupt your enemy from making a mistake. They're just getting back what they gave to you. But see, when black Western women don't prefer us, which is their option, they don't say to us, we're not going to treat you the same as we treat that chocolate brother over there because you simply look less intimidating than he does, and we better not call ourselves showing you off to our friends. Instead, they say, well, it's your attitude, or you're just ugly, or you just look like the type that, and then they fill in the blank after that with some character defect, right after saying the exact words, you look like. So what they're saying is they can judge your inner self by your outer phenotype, but you're not allowed to do this to them. The preference isn't wrong, but this gaslighting is, and this doesn't depend on a Western black woman's shade either. The truth is, if a light-skinned black man finds out about an admirer, we already know she is either non-black, non-Western black, or she's well-melanated. And none of these things are a problem. I mean, none of these things are things to hold against her. That's what she is. So I'm not holding these things against her, but I'm going somewhere with it. Hang on. Most of us don't mind these. But if she is a Western black woman, then we know. You find out you got an admirer, you light-skinned brother with intermediate or ambiguous phenotype, and you find out that a Western black woman is an admirer, we already know then she's either looking for some kind of fantasy in secret, or she's looking for a rescue about which she can brag to her friends and family because she didn't really deserve it in the first mucking place, i.e. she got other men's kids that she needs someone to take care of. So she's going to hold you to standards to which she never held her baby daddy. See, this is something that brothers who ain't necessarily light-skinned and racially ambiguous have also gone through because they were detected and suspected of being educated lames. And I'm putting that in quotation marks because to me, educated is not lame and lame's not automatically educated. But for not being the idness, idness means IDNS, intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype, and I pronounce negative that way intentionally. When you aren't the idness, you get slated as the cleanup man. You meet the standards other men don't have to meet. You do the courting other men don't have to do, and you pretty much get everything from her at an inferior quality from which she gave these other men that didn't meet these standards. So the bottom line is that Western black women in almost every case, at least in the southeastern United States where I lived, where J. Cash currently lives now, and where Caesar Cannon lives, ironically, New Orleans being an exception to this somewhat from what I've heard, will absolutely not pick us when they have 3 options and men, maybe even just 2. They pretty much got to run out of options in men before they start picking paler skinned, racially ambiguous men, especially those of us that don't fit any sort of idness stereotype. So if some were to say to me, well, look, man, you know, your man, you touting and you caping for your man Caesar Cannon, and he's not complaining about how he's been mistreated and unselected. Well, again, like I say, number one, New Orleans is somewhat of an exception, somewhat. At least it was a few years ago. I have a close relative that with the same phenotype as me that actually went to college in New Orleans. And he said, he told me that he wasn't having much trouble. And it's true, he wasn't. But that's New Orleans. Also, even if you are pale, but then you got some muscles, some tats, and some goals, then by appearance, you can intimidate white folks and some other black folks. So then that can get you a pass, unless they think it's fake. So what I'm getting at is that if you're going to say, well, CC disproves your case, black man, I'm going to say, no, actually not so much. Because I'm letting you know right off the bat, we already know this. Those of us on the Gulf Coast, we already know that New Orleans is a bit of an exception, and not all the time there either. But anyway, getting back to this, we men of this appearance and intermediate phenotypes get approached by women with the same problems that approach the black men referred to as the educated lames and squares, but there's one difference. And that is that we also get approached by married or committed women who have an interest in keeping us a secret. Actually, there's one other difference too. And that is that another man can speak and he may be able to prove in the way that he speaks and in his demeanor that he's not a square, he's not a pushover, none of these things. In our case, it's a hell of a lot harder to disprove that stereotype. May not even be possible. Now, this is coming from, as I said, from Western sisters, regardless of the shade. The only effect a woman's shade might have on her perception of us is that, in many cases, the paler women are the least interested. And they will tell us so vociferously long after we have learned not to shoot our shots or even to view them as other than strangers or play siblings, because they love to make us play cousins and play siblings when they don't hold any grudges against us, when they're nice and friendly but not interested. We learned this by the time we're 17. And long after age 17, they're the ones that vociferously tell us they don't date men like us. They are the last ones. Western black women are the last ones that want to be seen out in public with us, and the paler ones of them are the last ones that want to be seen out in public with us, especially in their youth. The preference is fine, but what is unacceptable, again, is the gaslighting and the relative mistreatment. So when it seems like lighter-skinned men have no solidarity with lighter-skinned women, it's actually the reverse. We've been taught from a young age for to shuck up and stay over there by yourself. And if we cool with her, it's because she's a play cousin or she's a play sister. That's why. And we don't mind defending them on that premise. But one of the things that must be understood is that, see, when you are a man that is chronically single and you do stand up and offer defense of a woman, then even she may turn around and wonder if you're just trying to impress her to get them draws. And you can lose respect for that. Not defending her or defending her, either one can equally cause you to lose her respect and earn her disrespect. That's the truth. So, ironically, the eels and the squares can get treated similarly, but a pale-skinned black man doesn't need to be lame or square to be treated the same way. He doesn't have to be a pushover to be treated the same way. He doesn't have to have low confidence to be treated the same way, and he doesn't have to be arrogant to be talked about badly for being arrogant. Because the stereotype is that we are already all of these things, even some of them being mutually exclusive to each other. And if you think that light-skinned men don't defend light-skinned women, keep in mind that we may not even know what women are saying about each other until someone we know brings our attention to a specific beef or grudge, and probably in a video. On the flip side, lighter-skinned women know what is being said about light-skinned and mixed men even better than we know, and at younger ages than we learned about it. I never heard a young black woman defend us from this until I was 39 years old, and she was somewhat light-skinned herself. Most of you can find this video. I just can't remember her name. But I never heard anybody before or after that, light or dark skin, stand up and defend light-skinned men from the stereotypes attributed to us. Elder black women weren't discussing these stereotypes anyway, and young attractive black women of any shade weren't willing to go against the grain and say that we were no less men than our more melanated counterparts. I've heard one black woman on YouTube, young, nice to look at, and also pale skin, or I should say light skin, caramel, I'd say. One, to sit up and go against the grain with her face on camera and say, this stuff is not true. Others don't feel comfortable doing that and saying that in many cases. Now, I'm sure, though, that in the lighter-skinned spaces and on the panels of a non-black man in LSM, there were some lighter-skinned women that would have been willing to say, look, we know these stereotypes aren't true. I'm sure that was the case. But again, see, I wasn't supposed to go on there. So I didn't. They wanted me to stay away from the channel. I stayed away. I didn't go on any live streams, even if I was awake at the time that they had them, or any panels. I stopped once they expressed that. So I didn't get to hear a lot of this directly. So I don't want to sit up and say that no one else ever said it. I just want to be honest about why I didn't get a chance to hear it. Even when I appreciated them standing up, I was still taken as an enemy, so I had to keep a distance. But simply put, this defense of us is apparently too much to hope for in most cases. As a matter of fact, I knew a half-black man here in the Middle East. I used to have to answer to him at one point. And he had to eventually marry a Filipino Muslim living here because he couldn't perform for a white woman, even though his mother's white. And a local Arab woman wasn't going to marry a foreigner easily anyway because they got money and they're tribal. And he's not Arab, nor is he from the Gulf. And African-American women weren't going to give him their best like they gave other men. He picked up on that, but he didn't know what it was about. So he wound up having to marry what seems to be a dark-skinned Filipino Muslim from the south of the Philippines, probably from Mindanao Island. That's what had to happen. He was one of those men that did not have the option of keeping it black and taking his, his light-skinned self and going back into the black community to make his kids full-blooded black. He did not have that option. It wasn't something he could have done. And that was why I recorded back in 2017, I think August 2017, that as pro-black as I've always been, we have to admit that there are black men in the black community of the West or black communities or populations, whatever you want to call them, in the West, that do not have the option. Because if they do keep it black, they have to wait longer than other men to find someone, and then they have to settle for an inferior quality in every way, form, or fashion, only being able to pull the ones that are unattractive, other men's kids, debt, and they have to do more to get less from her. A bad deal. Not because every black woman is a bad deal, but because the ones that are not bad deals would never want to be seen out in public with them. Wouldn't admit it if they liked them. That's what happens. This is real. So do we hate light-skinned women? That's unrealistic. Do we hate black women? I don't know a black man who categorically hates black women. Even the ones that don't marry or date black women. Can we defend and procreate only with light-skinned women and be exclusive like that? That's not an option Western black women of any shade have given us. We don't know. We can do this if we're willing to go back to the motherland. That's a possibility. But we don't know when two ladies get into grudges and beefs anyway until someone tells us. And interfering, even to defend her, can be seen as simping and irritating by the lady we defend. So to limit our private parts to such women would be an insanity on our part, and I would imagine an annoyance to most light-skinned women. For us to even limit our private parts to black women of any shade, usually we'd have to leave the West. And that's exactly what I've been telling black men of all shades to do. Maybe in the golden sphere, there are light-skinned women who like and will be seen out in public with light-skinned men, but in real life, they are simply too rare for us to agree to limit our romance and reproduction to them. I don't mean light-skinned women are too rare. I mean light-skinned women that are okay with being out with being with lighter-skinned men. They're too rare. Just like black men in general have options that many black women don't have. Within the black community, that changes, and that's with light-skinned women that have options that light-skinned men don't have. So someone whose name I can't recall once said it best: light-skinned men aren't jumping the fence. We are the fence over which black women jump when they get tired of black men, and then they leap straight to white men. Whatever her shade is, this is the end of it. When you jump a fence, you may put your hand on the fence and then jump over with your legs. We are that fence over which they'll put their hands or just jump clean over. At the end of the day, we are simply a fence. We're not even seen as the men inside of the fence. Ironically, in some major cities of Africa itself, including Nairobi and Johannesburg, the stereotype of lesser masculinity associated with our shade is spreading. And as Johannesburg becomes more thought-friendly and thought culture becomes more accepted, who do you think will be the first men to get cucked and disrespected the most as this stereotype gains ground? That's what it's like. That's what we're looking at. So we have every right to say, look, you also, ladies, have every right to not be attacked based on your shade. We have every reason to admit that it is wrong when you get attacked based on your shade, whether you were abundantly melanated like Sister Strober, or whether you were sparsely melanated. But even being defended by a light-skinned man can cause you to need more of a defense later on. We have a reason to be in the black manosphere because we are assumed to be not only worse men, but less manly itself out the gate without every action being overanalyzed and having too much read into it. And this is something that is pretty much unique to us. Pretty much so. Because at the end of the day, when a woman's looking at a so-called EL, but he's got a normal melanin count or a high one, over time, she can see that he's not lame. She can come to that understanding that, okay, he's educated but not lame. You don't want me to tell you what it would take a light-skinned man to do to prove that he's not lame once women look at him and say he looks like a lame. And that's the funny thing. We hear things like, you look like you don't think this much of women, or you look like you're used to getting your way, or, you know, these psychological diagnoses almost. And to be honest with you, that's a large part of why it is that a lot of ladies, including Light Skin Motivation, felt perfectly comfortable trying to psychologically diagnose me and read me and psychoanalyze me. Because I told them up front I'm a pale-skinned man. This is something that is done to black men across the board, but I notice that, and this is subconscious, people don't know they're doing this, but I notice Buttermilk guy saying certain things, the psychoanalysis is ratcheted up, skyrockets. What reason do we have to not be in the black manosphere after all that I just said? Thanks for listening. And I sincerely do wish success and healing for black folks, period, of all shades. The pale, the abundantly melanated, and even those in between who were mistreated for other things like ear size. I do want this for us. I want the black race to become a race that stops being so damn hard on ourselves, even in childhood. But we have to address this in the meantime. So I hope I did my part, and I hope I did justice. Hopefully this recording of mine will one day not be necessary and will not be true. Until then, I hope it helps. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum. And black, heterosexual, light-skinned, non-select male power just because they don't like it.